The Broad Street Bull podcast for Philly Hockey Now is brought to you by Osteria 545, serving great Italian food on West Broad Street in Paulsboro, New Jersey. Cooking that rivals your grandmother's. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Carchidi with Philly Hockey Now, and we're excited. This is our first Broad Street Bull podcast for Philly Hockey Now, and we're going to have a lot of information for you on the Flyers, on the draft. We're going to take questions and have a mailbag, and we're even going to give you a scoop or two. So let's get right into it. The draft, as you know, is July 7th and 8th in Montreal. The Flyers have the 5th pick. Montreal has number 1, New Jersey 2, Arizona 3, Seattle 4, and then the Flyers. It looks like the first 3 picks are pretty set. Montreal with the first pick is set to pick center Shane Wright, great two-way player. New Jersey left winger George Slavaski looks like their pick. He may be the most NHL-ready player in the draft. Number 3, Arizona, they're expected to take center Logan Cooley. Number 4, Seattle, that's where it gets a little bit iffy. They have a choice between 2 right-handed defensemen. It looks like that's the way they're leaning right now. Simon Nemec is one of the players. The other right-handed defenseman, David Jiricek. And that brings us to the Flyers. I have what we call the Flyers Super 6. These are 6 guys that will probably be available for the Flyers. Actually, 5 will be available. 1 probably won't be. We'll get into that in a second. But out of these 6 guys, the Flyers are going to get a very good player. As you know, the Flyers had a horrific season. They had their second worst season in their history, and any of these players are going to help them. Maybe not right away, but down the road, they're definitely going to help them. The Flyers need help, not only with their parent team, but with their farm system, and one of these guys is going to be a very good player. So let's get right into the Super 6. Number 1 is, as I said, it's going to be either Nemec, the 6'1", 192-pound right-handed defenseman, great two-way player. If Seattle picks him, then the other defenseman that the Flyers will have an opportunity to pick is David Jiricek. He's also a right-handed defenseman, 6'3", 189, also very good all-around player. Now, the thing with him is he had some knee surgery to repair ligaments. That was in January. He did come back and play. It looks like it's no problem, but just something to keep an eye on. The Flyers, of course, in 2017 picked Nolan Patrick, and he had some injury problems in the past, and you know how that turned out. So that may make it a little bit shaky to pick Jiricek if, in fact, Seattle picks Nemec, and I think Seattle will pick Nemec. So there are 2 guys on the Super 6. Number 3, guy I really love, Matt Savoy. He's a speedy center, very creative, very dynamic, 5'9", 175. Maybe his only drawback is his size. Maybe you can say his defense, he can improve his defense, but this guy is very, very dynamic, and I think the Flyers need a player like that. We're going to have some news on Savoy and how it pertains to the Flyers later on in this podcast. But right now, I just want to tell you that the Flyers like him. Like I said, he could help them, and in a couple years, he's not going to play right away. I love the kid's style. He's been compared to Braden Point, the top center on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and anybody compared to the Lightning's Point, you got to love, because you know all about Point. He's a tremendous player. Number 4 on the Super 6, Joachim Kemmel. He's a right winger, 5'11", 176 pounds, very young, also a dynamic skater, maybe not to the level of Savoy, but it's important to know he just turned 18. He's still growing into his body. I think he's going to end up being 190, 195 pounds. He did well in the fitness combine that was in Buffalo recently, and he's a guy the Flyers have their eyes on. And the next guy, number 5 on the Super 6, Cutter Gauthier. He's a center, left winger, very versatile, 6'2", 194. Unlike Savoy, he's got the NHL size, and he's still growing. I'm really intrigued by this kid. He's a product of the U.S. National Team Development Program, headed to Boston College on a scholarship. The Flyers love this kid. There's not much not to like. Because of his size, as I mentioned, he's a safer pick than Savoy. Isn't as shifty as Savoy, but he's got good speed. He's got a terrific shot. He's going to be a big-time scorer. He's a good defensive player, a better defensive player than Savoy. He raised his stock a lot at the Combine in Buffalo. He finished in the top 10 in four categories, so he had an amazing showing there. I'm going to go to number 6 now in the Super 6. It's a guy who I don't think the Flyers would necessarily pick at number 5, but if they trade down, I think they would certainly consider him. It's Jonathan Lekkerimäki. He's about a 5'11", 5'10 and a half, 5'11", 172-pound right winger. He's the top Swede in the draft. He's a play driver. And again, I think if the Flyers trade down in the draft, let's just say they go to 11 or in there and pick up a prospect or another pick, he may be a guy the Flyers consider. I really don't think they pick him at number 5. And now who do they pick? I think if they bypass a defenseman, and I think they will, I think the Flyers will probably pick Gauthier. He's got a lot working for him. To me, Juracek has some question marks. If you go with the right-handed defenseman, the surgery, his size, I think Gauthier checks more boxes. And that brings me back to Savoy. And I told you I had some information about him. I'm hearing whispers the Flyers will only take Savoy if they trade down. In other words, right now, they had their meetings a few days ago. Right now, Savoy is not, they're not really enamored at him at number 5. They like him. They like him a lot, but not at 5. If they trade down, again, if they trade down to 10, 11 in there, then I think he's on their radar. So keep that in mind. If I had to go to the bottom line and guess who they're going to pick, I think they go with Gauthier. He's, can play a couple positions, got a big shot. He's got the size, he's got the speed, very responsible defensively. There's also a possibility the Flyers trade up. What happens if they trade up, say they look to trade Ivan Provorov to New Jersey. New Jersey has the number 2 overall pick, and they have dangled the pick to a lot of teams. The Flyers know about that. Would New Jersey be interested in Ivan Provorov for the number 2 pick? At number 2, I think the Flyers will pick Slafkovsky. Just something to keep in mind right now because the Flyers, as I said, need a lot of help. And Slafkovsky is a guy with great size. He may not be NHL ready, to start the season. He may be NHL ready in a couple months after the season starts. So that's my draft rundown. That's the Super 6. Bottom line, I say they pick Gauthier, and we're going to be back in a few minutes. Now, a quick word from one of our sponsors, Osteria 545, serving great Italian food on West Broad Street in Paulsboro, New Jersey. Tell them Sam Carchidi from Philly Hockey Now sent you. Welcome back to our Broad Street Bull podcast, and I took a lot of great questions from readers on Twitter, and let's jump right into them. For our mailbag, at JoeAtta16 asks, he says, the Flyers are weak everywhere except goal, and he wonders, do you build first on offense or defense? That's a great question, and as you know, Joe, this team needs help everywhere. But to me, you build down the center position. That's the most important. You look at the 2 teams in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay, when healthy, they have Braden Point, number 1. You have Stamkos, you have Cirelli. Cirelli, third-line center, scored 17 goals this year. Colorado, McKinnon, Rantanen, JT Compher is their third-line center, scored 18 goals. You can go on and on. Crosby, Malkin, and former Flyer Jeff Carter with Pittsburgh. The Flyers in the second half of the year had Hayes healthy finally, so he was their top-line center with Couturier out. But then you had Lawton at number 2. He was obviously out of position at number 2. And the third-line center was Morgan Frost, who was not productive. So they need some help there. Now, let's assume Couturier is healthy, and he should be. So this year you're going to have Couturier 1, You're going to have Kevin Hayes 2. And right now you have Lawton 3. To me, Lawton is more valuable and more productive as a left winger. I would like to see him go after Kadri, who, of course, is a big part of Colorado. I pushed for Kadri, for the Flyers to sign Kadri a few years ago, and, of course, it never happened. But, he's a free agent. He's going to be less costly than Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau is another guy I would like to see the Flyers make a push for. And if you did get Johnny Gaudreau, of course, he's from South Jersey and Gloucester Catholic and has turned into a superstar. And if you did get him, he's a left winger, then I think you can afford to have Lawton as a third-line center. So a lot of ifs in there, but to me, there are two guys that I would target between Kadri and Johnny Gaudreau, and it's going to be tough, though, because of the cap. And that leads us into our next question from at Green Jack Tom. He says, how can we get a free agent when we only have $2 or $3 million in cap space? And the short answer is it's not going to be easy, Tom. The Flyers actually have $5.1 million in cap space, and that's distributed to only 18 players. And as you know, you have 22 or 23 players on the roster. How can they get more cap space? Well, it's going to be a little tricky, but James Van Riemsdyk, if you buy him out, his $7 million cap hit all of a sudden becomes 4.3. If you trade Ivan Provorov, you're going to save 6.75, and I'm assuming that you're going to trade him and get draft picks and prospects and not a veteran player in return, but that's also a possibility. So anyway, with those couple moves, you can afford Johnny Gaudreau, and maybe, you get him for $9 million, and that's with a hometown discount. But Calgary's going to try hard to sign him. There's no question about it. So let's go to the next question. At TV Production Guy says, who is calling the shots on the coaching hire? Is it Chuck Fletcher? Chuck Fletcher is calling the shots, but he's getting a lot of help, and you can understand, this is a big hire for the Flyers. You can understand why he's going to lean on some people. His right-hand man is Brett Flair, who does a great job with the draft. And, Flair's a guy he really leans on. Danny Briere, who is a special assistant to Chuck Fletcher, is another guy he leans on. He's also going to be talking, obviously, to Bobby Clark, Paul Holmgren, Billy Barber. They're all advisors. And the bottom line is that it has to be rubber stamped by Dave Scott. But Dave Scott, in this case, is just a figurehead. Dave is going to rely on Chuck Fletcher's recommendation. So, they've talked to Barry Trotz, they've talked to John Tortorella, they've talked to several others. We'll see how that plays out. But it's Chuck Fletcher's decision. But he's going to get some advice from other people in the front office, no question about it. At Buff985 asks, would John Tortorella be loved or hated by the fans and media? I think he would be loved by the media and loved by the fans because he would give an honest evaluation of the players. We haven't always had that from recent Flyers coaches. He would also hold the Flyers players accountable, and that's something that we really haven't seen enough of. Too much of a country club atmosphere? I would say so, and I think Tortorella would tighten things up, tighten the ship. That said, if you can get Barry Trotz, I bring Barry Trotz here because he would incorporate defense and tighten things up, and you would see vast improvement right away just with his system. Barry Trotz is the guy I want, but he is in demand. The favorite right now looks like Winnipeg, but he has talked a few times to the Flyers, and, hopefully he comes here. But Winnipeg seems like the leader in the clubhouse right now. At Dan Knightley asks, what did we do in a past life to deserve this hockey team? A great question, and I can tell you, Dan, I lived through the 1964 Phillies collapse. I was a 9-year-old kid and cried in the last day of the season when, I lived and died by Phillies baseball, and I can remember listening on the hi-fi radio to an out-of-town game. First time I think I ever did that. The Mets, the Phillies had lost 10 in a row, for those who don't know, had lost 10 in a row. Then they won 2 in a row at the end of the season. and they needed the Mets to beat the Cardinals on the last day. It would have been a three-way tie for first, and it didn't happen. I can remember crying because I followed the Phillies religiously and loved that team. Tony Gonzalez and Tony Taylor, Richie Allen, Johnny Callison, Jim Bunning, on and on and on. But the Phillies collapse was really only 10 days. It was a beautiful summer. The Flyers collapsed last year, and for the last 2 years, and they've won one playoff series in the last 10 years. It's lasted a decade. So I agree. This has been more painful than the Phillies collapse, which was epic at the time, and it's still epic. Nobody's ever lost 10 in a row with a 6.5 game lead with 12 games remaining. So I can sympathize with you. I don't know what we did in the past, but this to me has been more painful because it's lasted for a long, long time. At Paul DeZamba, he asks, what is the identity of the Philadelphia Flyers? That's a great question, Paul, and that is the problem with this Philadelphia Flyers team. There really is no identity. They don't excel on offense, don't excel on defense, haven't really had superb goaltending. Carter Hart has shown flashes of it. They're not a team that's hard to play against. There are just a lot of questions, and they're not a fast team. They're not a real physical team. They're right in the middle, and they really have to change their identity. I talked to Craig Berube, former Flyers coach, and of course now coaches the St. Louis Blues. I talked to him recently, and he said that is one of the major problems of this Flyers team. He said they really haven't had an identity since Ed Snyder was here, and I agree with Chief. And hopefully this summer, Chuck Fletcher makes some moves with the coaching change, with trades, with free agency. Hopefully he makes the moves that bring an identity here, because that's really lacking right now. And but that includes our questions. There were a lot of great questions. I want to thank everybody. I couldn't get to all of them, but I want to thank everybody for submitting them on Twitter. And that concludes our mailbag and our inaugural podcast. I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you join us down the road. We're going to continue doing this. I want to thank my son, also named Sam, who did a great job producing this. He is the smartest person in this room, believe me. He knows more about sports than I do, and probably almost anybody in the Delaware Valley. But again, thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to everybody for listening. And as the late, great Gene Hart used to always say, good night and good hockey.